Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exhumation Station, the channel where we uncover many forgotten gems of both horror fiction and horror film. Today I'm featuring a small book haul from a pretty iconic name when it comes to vintage horror fiction, most notably 80s and 90s. And that author is Ruby Jean Jensen. She has rose to a newfound level of popularity in recent years since the resurgence of the paperbacks from hell collecting, and kind of thanks to Grady Hendrix and Will Erickson's feature book, Paperbacks from Hell, kind of brought these forgotten works of horror fiction back into the mainstream. And many of them have become pretty collectible and sought after. And Ruby Jean Jensen is one of the premier authors that everyone is trying to collect. While Miss Jensen is experiencing a posthumous new level of fame in recent years, in case you have not heard of her, Ruby Jean Jensen is a very prolific horror author. She has written over 30 horror novels. The first of which was published in the 1970s, but she really started churning them out in the 80s and the early 90s. While she was rather prolific, she did not raise to the level of fame as some other horror authors of her time. My theory for that is because she was labeled rather pulpy. A lot of her stories dealt with creepy children, haunted dolls, things like that maybe would have been scoffed at by the typical adult reader. However, if you do happen to pick up something of hers, get past the oftentimes cheesy cover, and actually start reading it, you will see that her work also has themes carrying through of family secrets, deep-rooted family trauma, many Gothic elements, kind of a modern Gothic element, as well as lots of settings in rural America and small towns, which is something that really speaks to me. So now let's get into these recent acquisitions. I have, like many of us out there, I kind of have a book buying problem. And whenever I travel, I tend to travel a lot, mostly for work, but I always try to build in time for some book shopping. Where I am living currently, used bookstores really aren't a thing. I don't have a lot of access to vintage paperbacks. So whenever I travel somewhere for work, or really for any reason, the first thing I do is Google used bookstores, reach out on social media for recommendations of used bookstores, and I plan at least a full day to travel around the entire city, hitting as much as I can to kind of get my fix during my short time in whatever city I happen to be in. My work often takes me to Chicago, Illinois in the United States. There's a lot of good things to say about that city, but probably my most favorite thing that I've recently discovered is the availability of used bookstores. In the Chicago metro area alone, I compiled a list of at least 15 bookstores that I could try, and I was not able to hit all of them. I did not have time, but I did visit 5 or 6 of them, and I found some amazing finds that I will feature on this channel. These Ruby Jean Jensen finds were part of that Chicago trip. The first title I have here is Wait and See, originally published in 1986 by Zebra. You can see it's not in the best shape. Of course, I would prefer something in a little bit better condition, but I might have kind of a hot take when it comes to the book collecting community. Like I said, I would prefer a vintage paperback in perfect condition, but part of me kind of likes when it's well worn like this, because to me that means it's well read. And something about the spine cracks, the little loose corner up here, and the fact that it's obviously been well read contributes to the vibe of the collection for me, if that makes sense. I love knowing that someone read this and enjoyed it and decided to pass it along for others to enjoy. There's something kind of homey about a well-used paperback, and this is definitely one of them. I have actually read this one before. What I remember about it is the story follows this family lives in a rural community, and a member of that family, years prior to the story taking place, drowns by accident in a pond kind of nearby the family's property. There's a cover-up involved. Fast forward a few years, and the spirit of this girl who died, I point like that's her right there, but she's described a little bit differently in the book. But the story kind of follows this child named Kevin who comes and visits his extended family at this property, and this girl who died coming back and kind of taking revenge on her family. I'll read a short excerpt of the back cover. It says, "The body floated in the depths of the river. Slowly it rose and fell with the shifting waters. The once beautiful eyes were wide and staring. The hair, once as red as copper, had turned a pale, lifeless pink, sweeping out strand by strand in a large, undulating fan. Trapped beneath the murky waters of the river, she waited." The thing about a lot of these back cover descriptions is they don't reveal a lot about the actual plot. They're just kind of meant to give the reader a sense of, ooh, this book is really scary, please buy this. So it doesn't reveal a lot from there. What I do remember about this book is it moves a bit slow. And that is a common complaint with many of Miss Jensen's work. It's very slow. And that could be a good or a bad thing depending on what you're in the mood for. But I remember while I enjoyed this, it was just okay because the pacing was a bit off. Next, we have House of Illusions, published in 1988 by Zebra. You see we have that awesome kind of hologram cover. Hard to see what it actually is, but it's a house with 2 windows and a door with some kids and a person featured there, but it's very, very metallic and holographic. This one's in a little bit better condition. You can still tell that it's been read, but that's okay. Happy to have this. This book, I have not read this one. From what I gather from the back cover, it's about these 2 siblings that go and stay with their dad at a traveling carnival. And it turns out the fun house at this carnival is haunted with creepy clowns and things like that. If I'm being completely honest with you, this is not going to be a priority for me to read. It sounds a little bit campy. It sounds like a concept that has been overdone, if I'm being honest, in the horror genre overall. Combine that with the author's habit of moving things a bit slow, I don't anticipate this being a very good read. I could be wrong. I'm not judging it before I read it. I will read it eventually, but if you have read this one and like it, please comment below and let me know if I should skyrocket it to the top of my TBR list. Next, we have Best Friends, originally published in 1985 by Zebra. This one is in excellent condition. I was really excited to find all these at all, let alone in this great condition. Typically, I would not be too excited to read this. I've read a handful of Ruby Jean Jensen novels, and the haunted toy, haunted doll thing is a little overdone, and to be honest, I'm bored with it. But this one is a bit intriguing. I'll read you a small excerpt from the back cover. Miss Beatrice had frightened him, but now Barry wasn't afraid, would never be afraid again. For he had friends that no one else could see, friends who played with him and kept him safe, friends who did anything he wanted. It was such fun to watch them play Ring Around the Rosie with grown-ups, especially when they all fell down, dead. I just love the overly dramatic, yet not detailed enough synopsis on these books. There's just something about them I really enjoy. So it doesn't really say it's about haunted toys. The cover leads me to believe that it's either about toys or imaginary friends. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you know what this is about. But I'm a bit intrigued about this, whether it's toys or imaginary friends. this creepy kid that has friends that adults can't see that kill them. Sounds pretty fun, and it's pretty short, as you can see. So I don't think it would be like if I end up reading it and not liking it, because I am not someone who typically quits a book before he finishes it. So even if I were to start this and hated it, I would still continue and finish it. And so the fact that this isn't very long, I might give it a shot. One thing I will mention about the covers is, as you can see as we go through this little haul, a lot of the covers are a little cartoony. And again, I think a lot of adult readers can be turned off by that. They say don't judge a book by its cover, but we all do. In fact, covers are why I collect vintage paperbacks. But a lot of the covers with Ruby Jean Jensen's are misleading. For example, a book I read of hers called Wait and See, which I don't have here with me, but that is my favorite of hers that I've read thus far. And what was surprising to me is the cover, as was typical zebra fashion back in the day, featured a skeleton with a cartoony smile on his or her face. But I read it. I was in the mood for a retro semi-ghost horror story. I read it and was completely shocked at how dark it got, like really dark. It was one of the, it had some very adult themes and themes of abuse. I was pleasantly surprised at how dark it was and how much it affected me. I read it maybe 10 years ago and I still remember really enjoying it. Maybe I will reread it to refresh myself and review it on this channel, because I truly believe that many people are overlooking this book because of its cartoony cover, and it was one of my favorite reads of recent years. Next we have Celia, published by Zebra in 1991. This is another very well-read copy. Again, it does not really bother me. I am happy to have this. One day if I find a better edition, or this edition in a bit better condition, maybe I will replace it. But for now, I'm very happy to have this. This is another example of a misleading cover. It looks like a little doll that has done some damage. If I remember correctly, this book has nothing to do with the doll or any toys at all. It involves a family on the run. I'll read you a little excerpt from the back cover. Now, Celia and her 3 children are on the run, relying on an underground network of helping families. Celia is headed for Northern California and a brand new life. But someone is following Celia, someone who knows her every secret destination and who intends to keep his promise. So it's more of a story about some guy pursuing this runaway family. Nothing to do with the doll. Lost and Found, published in 1990 by Zebra. I did read this one very recently. I think I read most of it on the plane back from the trip where I actually bought this. I'm sorry to say, didn't love it. It was a little too slow for what it is. It was a little bit cheesy, and don't get me wrong, I love some cheese with my horror, but this one just did not, it wasn't creepy, it didn't keep my attention very well. It was just a little bit, for lack of a better word, stupid. This tells the story of our main character, Margaret, not Margaret, but Margaret. She is having dreams about an infant in the woods near her house that is buried in the ground, and in her dreams, the infant comes out of the ground. She has sharp teeth and is very threatening in the dream. And it was just, it was a very tired concept to me. I could just see the B-movie role of that dream in my head. And it just was a little bit corny to me. And then as the story progresses, Margaret's daughter comes home talking about this girl in the woods that she sees. And come to find out towards the end of the story, we figure out who this actual infant is. There was a death that occurred. There was an infant buried in the woods, and that's where I'll leave it. Again, this was a fine story. I think I gave it 2 stars. It was, it didn't really keep my attention, but it was a fun little read. Again, I will say, even though it's really not that long, it moved a little bit too slow. Next, we have Mama, published by Zebra in 1983. So this is an earlier work. Again, well-read copy, but we love it just the same. This one obviously features her common theme of a haunted doll. Let me read you the back cover synopsis of this one. Once upon a time, there lived a sweet little dolly. The wording of that first sentence just screams, I don't want to read this. Again, not because of the author's writing style or her abilities of progressing a plot, anything like that. I enjoy her writing. But this concept of a creepy doll has been so overdone, and the horror ecosystem is just completely inundated with creepy dolls, and I'm kind of over it. Let me know in the comments if you feel the same way as me. But we have our sweet little dolly here. Her porcelain face was so smooth, just like a baby. Her mouth even had a tiny round hole so she could eat and breathe. But her one beaded glass eye gleamed with mischief and evil. She had waited a long time in the attic for someone to set her free. And then it goes on to say some girl comes and sets the doll free. I'm sure the doll kills people. You can tell that Ruby Jean Jensen and or her agent or publisher found a formula that worked, that sold, and they stuck with it. That is the only real complaint I have about Ruby Jean Jensen as an author, is that there was not a lot of deviation from the formula that worked, aside from her title, Wait and See, which I mentioned being a favorite of. One of my favorite things about thrifting books and shopping at used bookstores is looking at the places that it's been. Like there's stamps in here from the various bookstores that it's been featured at that nobody bought. There's an old price of $170.75 up there. I paid a little bit more than that. I still didn't pay that much money for this. And can we just take a moment? There is nothing that compares to that smell of an old paperback that's been sitting on a shelf in some used bookstore for years and years and years, or it was sitting in somebody's house forever and ever and ever, and then that person passes away or moves and someone donates all the books. There is nothing that compares to that smell. Seriously, after I'm done, I might just sit here and smell this for a while. Well, let me know if I'm the only weirdo who does that. And there you have it, our little haul of Ruby Jean Jensen summarized. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, she has experienced a newfound posthumous level of fame since the resurgence of these vintage horror paperbacks becoming collector's items. And because she is experiencing this level of fame, a lot of her work has become very collectible, and a lot of us know that the word collectible translates to pricey. So I was extremely excited to find all of these across 2 bookstores, and they were normal used bookstore prices. If you look up some of these online, they can go for upwards of $30, $40, $50, $100, depending on the condition. So I was very happy to find these out in the wild, couldn't believe it, and I wanted to share it with everyone. That wraps up today's video. If you liked what you see, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. Let me know what you would like to see more of on this channel. Any unique reads you'd like me to feature on this channel, I am happy to do it. Follow me on Instagram. The handle is @Exhumation Station. I will link it down below. And as always, thank you for joining me. Until next time, have a good one.